What's up everyone, welcome back to Just Finish Coding. This is part 2 of our Cat and Apple game development series, so let's get coding.
Just finished coding.
Now quick interjection here, if you've not watched part 1 of this series, please make sure you watch that video first before you come here because we're picking up from where we left off and you'll be pretty lost. I'll leave a card for you right here. Please watch the video and then come right back. Now if you're still here, I'm going to assume that you've watched part 1, and in which case you should be able to move your cat with the arrow keys, and the program kind of looks cool, but it really is missing the essential part of it, which is the apple and also the nice aesthetics. So let's get right into our code. The first thing I'm going to do is to head over to the backdrops and actually change this boring white backdrop into a nice blue sky backdrop. So head over to this backdrop icon on your bottom right corner and then click on it once again. This should take you to a whole bunch of backdrops that Scratch has by default, and you want to click on this one which says blue sky. And already the game looks so much better just by adding this. So the next thing I want to do is to add in an apple. So to do that, head over to the sprite library by scrolling over this icon and then clicking on it which says choose a sprite. This should take you to the sprite library and you want to click on this sprite which says apple. Now obviously this apple is way too big, so I'm going to downsize this to about 65, and I think this is a much better apple to have on your screen. Now we haven't really coded anything for our apple yet, so let's get right into the code. Just like the cat, I want to initialize the apple when the green flag is clicked. So head over to events, grab this block of code which says when green flag is clicked. And when the green flag is actually clicked, what we want the apple to do is to not go to a particular coordinate, but we want it to pick a random coordinate across the screen. Now you could make it across the screen, but what I actually did in the preview itself was to actually have, an imaginary rectangle drawn where the apple can pop up. Because I don't really want the apple to pop up at some corner of the screen like this, and then the player has no idea where the apple is. So I decided to actually have it somewhere along the center of the screen. So to do that, you head over to the motion category, grab this block of code which says go to X, go to Y, and here's what you need to do. Head over to operators and grab this block which says pick random 1 to 10. Now for the X coordinates, I want it to be from positive 200 to negative 200, okay? And this is going to ensure that the sprite isn't at the extreme corner, but it's pretty, spread out towards the edges. So it could be about this point, I believe, right? So about this point, okay? So this is going to make the apple go, like I said, in the horizontal side of the imaginary rectangle. And once you put that in here, now you can see that the cat actually moves to quite a few positions, and none of these positions are actually, too far out and too hard for the user to reach or see. So now for the Y coordinates, we're going to do something very, very similar. I'm going to duplicate this and I'm going to change this pick random from 200 to negative 200 to be about 150 to negative 150. And since our Y coordinates is from positive to negative 180, this again is going to have the same effect where the apple can't be too much to the edge of the stage. So put that right in there, and now you can see that the apple goes to a much better position than what would be if we just let it to be random and then it goes to the top of the right or the top of the left of the screen, for example. So that would pretty much sort out the apple. So now let's get into actually what happens when the sprite collides with the apple. So for the collision, I'm going to be coding that in the apple sprite itself. So what you want to do is to head over to control, grab a forever loop, and within that you want to grab an if then. And within this if then, the condition you want to put is to head over to sensing and grab this block of code which says if touching mouse pointer. And now you can click that arrow and change the mouse pointer to be sprite 1. I'm actually going to rename that sprite to be cat, but you can leave it as you want. So I'm going to head back to the apple sprite and I'm going to say if touching cat. Then what I'm going to be doing is to basically hide the apple and then go back to some random position. So that reminds me to actually add in a show right at the beginning, because if I actually hide the cat at some point in time and then the user actually quits the game and goes, The next time the apple is actually going to remain hidden because we simply haven't specified show right at the beginning. So when we are touching the cat, we would hide. Right after we hide, we'd again go to this random position. And once we do go to the random position, we can show ourselves once again. Now this process is going to be pretty much instantaneous, and the user might not even really notice any sort of time lag right here. But let me just warn you right here that there will be a time lag, and it's going to differ from computer to computer depending on the speed of the CPU, graphics card and all that. But for this kind of game, this really is okay to leave it this way, because I mean, this thing is going to render pretty fast even on a pretty crappy machine. So just have it as it is. Alright, so now what we need to do is to actually increment our score when the collision is done. And to do that, head over to the variables tab and grab this block of code which says change score by 1. And we can do that right after the sprite is shown, or we can do it before. I'm just going to do it before, but it really doesn't matter. So now if you look at your two sprites, you should actually notice that we haven't set our score to be anything right at the beginning. Now the ideal thing to do in this kind of situation would be to actually make a new variable called an initializer and then set everything, all the variables there. But since we just have two variables, I'm going to do that in the apple sprite itself. So right at the beginning, I'm going to set the score to be 0, and I'm also going to be setting the time left to be 30 because this is a 30-second game. So click on that arrow right there, change the score to be time left, and there you are, you're good to go to the next step. For your next step, what you actually want to do is to program your timer. And doing this is probably the hardest part in our game, but it's still pretty simple. So head over to events, grab another when green flag is clicked, and by doing this, we will execute what's called a parallel script. So both of these scripts are going to be starting when the green flag is clicked. And since Scratch is not, like a text-based language, we can actually do this and have these two codes execute parallelly. Okay, so when the green flag is clicked, like I set up the time right here, I think, but I actually want to do it right here. Because the reason I'm doing this is because I'm going to have the time left decrementing right here. So in case, this code, this script executes slightly before the script, we might start to have some errors. So I'm going to leave the time left right here. Alright, so the code I'm going to have is a repeat number of times, and you should have a repeat 10 by default, but I'm going to change that to be repeat 30. Okay, and what I'm going to do is to wait for 1 second, and then I am going to decrement the time. So I'm going to change the time left by -1. So change time left by -1, and this is going to actually ensure that you have a timer that's constantly counting down. Now at the end of this, you're obviously going to have nothing that's going to happen because we haven't really programmed what happens when the time gets to 0. So when it actually does get to 0, that's going to be at the end of this repeat loop. So what I'm going to do is to broadcast a message which is going to be game is over. Okay, so I'm not going to program that right away. I'll do that a little later in the video, but for now just head over to events, grab a broadcast message and just call the message game over. There we are. Hit OK and you should have that set up. So now the next thing I'm going to be doing is to actually test our codes to see that everything works kind of well. Now you can see that the apple moves just the way we want it to, and already the game looks pretty good. But there's a small catch with the movement of our cat. So now you can see if I press the top up arrow key and the right arrow key at the same time, the sprite literally guides through the stage without actually changing its costume, and that's pretty weird. But here's the reason that's actually happening. So head over to the cat sprite. I'm going to zoom in so that you guys can see better, and this is what really happens. So when I press the up arrow key, okay, the costume is going to switch to like the running costume with the legs. And then right here, when I actually press the right arrow key, the costume is going to switch back to whatever it was initially, since we have two next costumes. So the simple fix for this is just to add in if not up arrow key is pressed. So if the up arrow key is pressed, then we'll just change the costume once. And if the up arrow key is pressed while the right arrow key is pressed, then we'll be changing the costume just once. Okay, we won't be changing it twice. So to add that, just have an if then. Okay. And you want to grab a not from the operators tab, and on the condition within your not, you just want to have this duplicated condition if key right arrow pressed or key left arrow is pressed. Okay, and it's important you add both, because if you don't add in an or and you just have one of that, that's going to defeat the purpose and you're just going to have the block execute when one of the two keys are pressed. Alright, so within this, all you have to do is to put this next costume within that if then. So remove those two next costumes and you want to drag this if then all the way to the top. Put that right there and put in the next costume. Once again, you want to do that for the down arrow key as well. So once you put in your if then, make sure you put your next costume within that if then. And now if we actually test out our code, you can see that our sprite runs across the stage instead of actually gliding. Now you can see when we press the down arrow key, he still seems to be gliding, and we'll be fixing that right now. So I realized the reason for that was simply because we messed up in our if condition and we didn't have the left arrow key programmed, and we just had two if right arrow keys pressed. So now when you actually test out your code with those two, you can see that the sprite runs across the stage and doesn't really glide in that way anymore. So there we are. That is going to be pretty much your entire game mode, and all we have to do now is to actually program our end screens, and that's what we'll be doing right away. For our end screens, I'm going to have the exact same backdrop, and I'm just going to have pretty much the exact same look of the game. I'm not going to be hiding the variables or any of that, and all I'm going to have is a sprite that's going to pop up that says game over, your score is whatever, press the green flag to play again. And while that happens, I'm actually going to hide the cat as well as the apple. So to do that, if you remember correctly, we actually broadcasted a message when the time actually went to 0. Now what this message is going to be, how we're going to use this message is that when a message is broadcasted, all the sprites can actually sense it, and we can actually have code that's going to execute when we receive or when we sense that particular message. So to do that, I'm going to head over to the cat sprite, grab this block from the events tab which says when I receive game over, and all I'm going to do when I receive the game over message is to actually hide my sprite. So it's really simple, and that's what the game over message is actually going to do. And I'm going to do the exact same thing for the apple as well. So now I can add in a hide right after I broadcast the message, but just for simplicity's sake, I'm just going to do the same thing I did when I actually programmed the cat, and that is when I receive game over, I'm going to hide. And that's pretty much it. So now when the time actually gets to 0, these two sprites are going to be hiding. Now let's get into the game winning sprite. So I'm not sure if I actually added a show right at the beginning of the cat, and I'm going to do that right now. So now yeah, let's get into the text sprite. So within choose a sprite, you want to click on this block which says paint a sprite, and you should have your costumes tab pop up. Now don't worry if this doesn't look exactly like mine. You could zoom in or zoom out of this, but I just like it in this mode, so I'm going to keep it this way. So now you want to click on text, and you could choose in any color you want. I'm going to go with a bright red color with a saturation of 100, but really this is up to you. So the core, so the text I'm going to have right here is just going to say game over. Your score is your score is whatever score would actually pop up like a text, the way like a chat works. I'm not sure if you get me, but you'll get it in a few minutes. And I'm going to make this thing a little bit bigger, just like this. And then I am going to have another message that's going to be, not really a message here, it's just going to be text. And I'm just going to say click the green flag to play again. That's going to be in black text, okay? So click the green flag, and I'm going to have green pop up in the green color. So I'm just going to have a click there, and then I'm going to have another message to play again. There we are, to play again. Perfect. So now once again, I'm going to zoom into these two things just to make them look a little bit better. And once I'm done with that, all I'm going to do is to grab in a green flag from whatever. So click the green flag. So just have in another text there and just make it the best green color you possibly can. So I'm going to have in this color. I think this looks good enough with the brightness a little lower. And oopsie, that was actually for that text. So I'm going to have a new text box, and now I'm going to set that color to be what it was. So this is going to be the green flag. So click the green flag to play again. Perfect. So now I'm going to enlarge this text just like I did, and I'm actually going to have this on a new line. So this thing is going to be like this. Perfect. So now obviously you can make this end screen look a lot better, but just for simplicity's sake, I'm going to leave it at this point, and this is pretty much going to be our end screen. Now I'm going to rename this sprite to be the end screen, and here's what I'm going to do in its scripts. Okay, so I'm going to head over to the code, and then I am going to move this to about this position right here, and I think this is going to look pretty good once the game is actually over. So when the green flag is clicked, what I want to do is to go to that particular coordinates, and really you could just move your end screen around. You don't have to use the same coordinates as I'm using. So when it actually goes to this coordinate, when the green flag is clicked, we'd want it to hide because we don't want the end screen to be showing right at the beginning. So add in a hide after that. And now when the game over message is actually sent and this sprite senses it, then we'll actually show it. And then what we'll also do, so first let me add in a show. What we'll also do is to grab this block which says say for 2 seconds, and we'll actually be saying the score. Okay, so now to actually do that, we can use a pretty neat trick. So you want to grab this block of code from operators which says join apple banana, and you can change that apple to be score, and then always add in a colon and then a space. Okay, otherwise your score is going to come like in the same word, and you won't have that nice space effect that I'm talking about. Anyway, just add in a space after that. So now you want to put in the score variable right there, and this is going to ensure that the end screen just says score is whatever, like, you know, that nice cloud which you see in comic books. Anyway, so let's have this, and right after this, all I'm going to do is to stop all my scripts, and this is going to ensure that I actually end the game. And now the user is going to be forced to press the green flag to play again, and nothing actually keeps executing in the background when the game is actually over. The last thing I'm going to do for this game is to head over to the Apple sprite and actually have a nice little sound effect that's going to start when the cat touches the apple. And now this sound effect is actually available in the Scratch library itself, and to access that, what you want to do is to click on sounds and then grab this sound which says chomp. I think it's on by default, but in case it's not, you just want to head over to the sound library and search for chomp, and you should see a sound pop up like this, and all you have to do is to click on that sound, and that's going to pop up in your sound tab right here. So now you can actually make the sound softer or louder depending on this, and I know you can hear that right now, so I'm just going to make it as soft as possible. And once that's actually done, I'm actually going to just leave it as it is. And now I'm going to head over to the sound tab in my scripts within my code, and I am going to have this block of code which says start sound chomp execute right when the cat actually touches the apple. Now the advantage of having this code which says start sound over this block which says play sound until done is that this thing is going to let the code after it execute while this goes on parallelly, while this code is actually going to wait until the sound is done to actually execute all of this code. So now since this sound effect is like 0.3 seconds, it's not going to matter that much, but still whenever you're using a sound effect, always make sure you use start sound and not play sound until done. So now finally that would be your chomp game, and let me actually test out playing. So boom, that score is 2, 3, and I'm just going to wait until this is done so that I can save you guys some time. So I'm under 5 seconds now, 4, 3, 2, and 1, and boom, your score is 6, game over, press the green flag to play again. Perfect. And that, ladies and gentlemen, would be your cat and apple game for total beginners. If you've enjoyed this game series, make sure you click on the video on your screen right now, and that'll take you to a brand new game segment. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next game series.